The army played an important role in completing my father's education. My father had to work very hard, attended all the classes, lessons and seminars, and he successfully passed all his exams. He was presented with his diploma, but also was promoted to a higher rank. But my father was also popular, because coming from the circus, he was often asked, show us what you did in the circus, and my father was quite happy to show his acrobatic and tumbling skill. My father loved playing football, and at that particular match he got very hot, and at the end of the match got very thirsty. And he told me he walked over this dripping tap which had some ice deposit on, and he drank that icy cold water. Straight away he felt a shock on his lung, and that turned into an inflammation which made him cough, and the inflammation got worse by coughing, and then he started coughing blood. And then he got into a very high temperature and falling in and out of consciousness, and then he went into a deep coma for about more than a week. And everybody thought at that point he's never going to make it, but you know, it's not knowing my father, and he's a fighter. And with the care, he slowly came out of coma and slowly recovered from that ordeal. This incident will create some important consequences for his future and destiny. He said to me many years after that, he felt something flapping on his lung and made him tickle or made him cough. And at one point he coughed something, and he coughed up some scar tissue, which definitely stopped his flapping, and never had any problem with that again. We're in 1933 now, and my father's finished the army and went back home and started practicing with Uncle Joseph. And he told me about this act they've put together. They were dressed up as American sailors, and my father was sitting in Uncle Joseph's back, both of them reading the newspaper, and that's how they started the act. It was a slapstick comical acrobatic act. It wasn't a big act, but it kept them afloat for some time. But they also did an act that he never told me about, the Arton Flying Troupe. I'll show you a picture. I believe this photograph was taken around the mid-30s. My father's on the top left, my Uncle Joseph is on the top right, beneath him is my Uncle Imre, and beneath Uncle Imre is a partner called Pipa. And the other three, I'm afraid I can't tell you who they are. As you can see on those sketches, they were exclusively working with the apparatus, but in the future they will introduce the springboard in combination with the system, making it a much bigger act and much more interesting, but also much more difficult and dangerous to perform. Yesterday I was talking with my brother Willy from Hungary. We talked about the family, and we've agreed that there was 13 brothers and sisters in all. That's a fact. But he differs with my story, because he mentioned 2 other brothers that I didn't even know about. I don't recall my father mentioning them or talking about them or even having any pictures, so I won't be able to comment on that. I won't be able to comment very much on those next pictures you're going to see. All I know, they're close family. And how do I know that? Is that my father made a video of those pictures and called that video Ma famille qui a disparu, which in English means that my lost family. And that's all I can say. So let's have a look. My father's worst fear is that one day he would lose his mother, and when that day happened he said it was the saddest day of his life. As far as he can remember, when he was a young child, he was always by her side, holding and tugging her dress, being held on her hip while she was cooking. He really grew up by her side and even learned how to cook from her. Talking about his mother, I can see in his eyes the sadness and the emotion in his voice that he tried to hide. He carried all this sadness all his life, but like they say, life goes on. They managed to find a contract to work in Spain in a circus. They traveled to Spain and they started to work. But in 1936 they found themselves right in the middle of the Spanish Revolution. And one morning my father said there was a plane that flew over the circus and dropped a bomb in the middle of the circus and destroyed the whole circus. Luckily there was no casualty, but that was the end of that contract and they had to come away from Spain. Now that they have traveled back from Spain safely and they're back in Budapest, 1937, not much happened that I know of. 1938, 39, I believe around that time my father was dating his future wife, Ibi. They were planning to get married, but that didn't go down very well with her family. Because my father being an acrobat working in the circus, they said that when he was working he would never be at home, and when he would be at home he wouldn't be working, and financially not good. Well, they got on with their wedding and they got married the 5th of November 1939. I don't know if there was some condition attached to that marriage, like my father getting a steady job, but it was the beginning of the war and not much was going in show business. He found a job as an engineer in the steel factory in Budapest, making parts for machinery and also some flat spring for machine gun. By now the war was gaining momentum and the army is actively sending out leaflets and asking the people to join ranks to build up the army and to get ready for war. They came in looking for my father, but at that point my father was badly injured at the hand and was heavily bandaged. When they saw the injury they realized they couldn't take him with that condition, but they said they would be back when he'll get better. And my father said to me that he's not in a hurry to get better and he's not interested to fight for the German either. Well, the injured got infected and it lasted quite a long time before he got better. The 8th of December 1940 she gave birth to Willy, my father's first son. By now my father has fully recovered from his injury and was back to work. But the army couldn't take him at that point because he was a working civilian and he was the only breadwinner and the sole provider to his young family. And here's some pictures of my father and his wife and also Willy when he was a small boy. 1940 to 45, it was a difficult time for them. Eating, finding food and staying alive was by far their main occupation. My father had a motorcycle, a BMW. With his friend and neighbor Lally, who also used to work in the circus, they used to go to the countryside to the farmers and buy some food, vegetables and sausages and things like that. One day he said they went on this bumpy road and my father was talking to Lally, and then he asked him a question and Lally wouldn't answer, so he asked him the question again and he didn't answer. When he looked back, there wasn't Lally there. So he turned around with his motorcycle and went. And in the distance he see this woman with the skirt. He was quite intrigued with that. So when he got closer, it wasn't the woman, it was Lally. When he fell down, he tore the inside of his trousers, and with the breeze it acted like a skirt. And they both really laughed. Unfortunately, there was not so many funny moments at that time. I remember my father telling me about this 4 hair-raising encounter with the Russian soldiers. The first time was with my Uncle Joseph. They went to this farm with the motorcycle and concluded a huge deal with the farmer. The farmer gave him half a pig, there was some smoked bacon, there was some ham, sausages, lard for cooking, oil, flour, paprika, also some apricot brandy, palinka and some wine. And my father said that the sidecar was packed to the rim with food and vegetables. They were quite happy to conclude that deal, and they were making their way home. And on their way home they stumbled on this Russian checkpoint, and the Russian put a huge agricultural machine across the road. And my father said to Uncle Joseph, if they found what we're transporting, at the best of times they'll take it all away from us, and even we can get killed for that. And as he approaches the checkpoint, the Russian says to my father to come closer and to slow down and to park the motorcycle by the agriculture machine. As my father gets closer to that machine, he sees on the side of the road a shallow ditch that the machine could not cover. He pretends to slow down, goes into the ditch, hits the throttle, goes on the other side of the road. The Russian, taken by surprise that my father is escaping, gave that vital distance between him and the Russian. And my father went full speed, but the Russians managed to start shooting at them, and he can hear the bullets whizzing by and hitting the road and ricocheting. And my father said, "Thank God these Russians are bad shot. We were lucky to come away that day without getting hit or killed." But they made it safely back home to tell the tale another day. The second hair-raising encounter with the Russian soldiers was yet again with my Uncle Joseph. They went to this nearby village to the flea market to buy things they needed and other stuff they could use to exchange or trade with. On their way back, they hitched a ride on this freight train and jumped on this open platform where other Hungarians were sitting and standing there and waiting for the train's departure. As the train was about to move, two Russian soldiers jumped on the other platform, their suitcases in one hand, their rifles strapped to the back, and a handgun in the other, making their way towards my father. They were terrorizing the Hungarian men, even hitting them on their head with their handgun and asking them to hand over their wristwatch. And my father said it's not unusual to see Russian soldiers with 2 or 3 wristwatches on each arm, because they were crazy about them and even obsessed with them. As they made their way to the platform where my father was, they decided to plonk themselves in front of them. Sitting on their suitcase facing Uncle Joseph and my father, they got their cigarette out, started to smoke. They were laughing and comparing each other's wristwatch. And my father said discreetly to Uncle Joseph, "When the train picks up some speed, let's kick these 2 idiots off the train." And my Uncle Joseph could not disagree. So as the train picked up that speed, they approached these 2 soldiers. The soldiers felt threatened. They started to stand up and reaching for the handgun, but they were not quick enough. My father and Uncle Joseph gave a massive horse kick. They fell backward and started rolling, and they fell off the train. And my father kicked their suitcases after them, and he could see the Russian rolling in the dirt, tumbling and getting mingled in their rifle. And the Hungarians started to cheer and applauding them. And my father said nothing was ever said, mentioned or heard of these 2 soldiers ever again. And perhaps maybe I got that one wrong. Maybe it was the 2 Russian soldiers' hair-raising encounter with my father and Uncle Joseph. The third encounter with the Russian soldiers was this time with a friend. They were walking in Budapest and suddenly got rounded up at gunpoint with 30 or 40 other Hungarians. The Russian told them that they were needed to come and help to reinforce and build their defense near the front. My father didn't like the idea, and he said to his friend, "I'm not going with the Russians, and as soon as I have the first opportunity, I'm jumping out the queue, and you should follow me." And his friend said, "Wow, you're crazy. We could get shot for doing that, and it's not worth it for 2 or 3 days of work." My father said, "Well, suit yourself, but I'm not going, and I'm jumping out the first opportunity." As they're marching towards the truck, my father takes the opportunity while the Russians were not looking. He jumps out the queue, lean against this wall with the other onlookers there. He said to his friend to come and follow him, but he wouldn't. As they passed, even the Russian didn't realize that he belonged to the group. They all got put into a Russian truck and been taken away. And my father made his way home. And 2 or 3 days later, his friend didn't come back, but he came back 5 or 6 months later in a sorry state, and even some other Hungarians didn't even make it back. So that was another close call. The fourth encounter with the Russian soldiers, this time he got picked up with half a dozen of Hungarians and been taken to this local bridge where the Germans were shelling and did some damage to it. They crossed the bridge. Some of the Russians said to the Hungarians to fill up the crater holes that the bombs made with rubble and stones. And the other Russian took my father to another place and asked him to dig out this stone that was in the mud. And my father said it was quite a big stone, but anyway, he moved it around to loosen it up. As it came a bit loose, he tries to pull it out. As he pulls it out, the mud and the water underneath the stone created some vacuum. and he couldn't put it any further, and he kept slipping back. Well, that happened a couple of times, and the Russian got fed up and he asked him to try harder. So my father tries again, and the same thing happened. The vacuum was created, and then the stone slid back into place. Well, the Russian shouted at my father, and with the butt of his rifle hit him right in the back, and my father fell flat forward. As he fell flat forward, he heard